Welcome, everybody. This is John Paul Mendocha. This is the Raging Verbalist number 42. And I am Dr. Speed Selling, but I'm also the Raging Verbalist. This airs every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Pacific Standard when we go back to the regular time. Today is a very special episode, and I'm going to share my own journey. 19 years ago today, exactly today, it was 9/11/2001. And for those of you who don't remember it, don't understand it, don't know what happened, I will share that with you, as well as the story about what happened to me during that fateful day. Not only did the world change, but it changed dramatically for me and what was about to take place. So let me do the quick setup of what happened on that day. And what happened on that day is that I was actually on an airplane. So here's what had taken place. The week before, I was in Chicago at a show. I was speaking to a bunch of printers. I was actually in the publishing business, helping printers learn how to market and sell better. And I had speaking slots and had all of those things. And as if running one business weren't enough, I was in the middle of doing a turnaround for a client based in Massachusetts, and I was just a busy guy. So Saturday, that would be September the 9th, I flew home from Chicago. It had been a busy, tiring, exhausting period. Sunday I was going to be home, and Monday morning on September 11th, I was flying to Phoenix on the very first flight out from Ontario, California. It's going to be a typical week because when you do turnarounds, it is a jam-packed, get, 10 pounds, 12 pounds, 15 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag. And this was going to be no different. Was very used to this kind of intensity. So Monday was going to be Phoenix. Wasn't even going to be there for the full day. Flying to Dallas on Monday evening, going to be in Dallas for about a day and a half, fly to Atlanta, be there on Wednesday evening, Atlanta on Thursday, and then fly home on Thursday night so I could be in my office on Friday, because remember, I hadn't had an office day in a while because I had been in Chicago. So what happened on that day is that I get up early like I always do, and I'm on the first flight, and I know that I've got to get to the airport early. Now, everything is set, packed up on Sunday, had everything kind of arranged. In fact, I'm meeting my client in Phoenix because we're going to a meeting with a customer. Also, I have somebody who works for me who's in Austin who's going to be flying in. So it's all coordinated, all pulled together. And I can tell you that logistically, you got to think all this stuff through. So get to Ontario Airport, typical busy early morning. The flight is going to be packed, and get on the flight early. I'm on the very first flight. So it is like 5 a.m. on the West Coast, and get on that flight and take off. Now, what happened while I was on the flight, what was taking place, which I had no idea, was the events of 9/11. So we land in Phoenix, and I'm now in Phoenix, and get off the plane. Not a word has been spoken, and I power up my cell phone, and I'm calling Doug in Atlanta, because Doug is who I was going to see on Thursday, if you remember. Doug actually was my fulfillment house for my publishing company, and we had a big promotion being planned from my distributor starting in the next week or so. And this was going to be good because we had just done the big show in Chicago, and this was tied to that. So I get on the phone with Doug, and I say, the phone rings, and Doug answers it. And he said, it sounds agitated, sounds upset. This is like a little after 6 a.m. Phoenix time. And I said, which is Pacific time, by the way. For those of you who don't know, Arizona doesn't change time zones, so they change time zones. So we're still on Pacific time. And I'm talking to Doug, and I'm walking because I'm going to, find and meet the guy who works with me, works for me, and then we're going to go rent a car and go pick up the client who's already flown in. They flew in from Boston on the weekend. So as I'm doing that, first thing Doug says is, "Do you know what's going on?" Very agitated. And I said, "Well, Doug, I know I was supposed to call you last Friday. I was at the show in Chicago, got really busy, opened a couple of additional speaking slots. I took those. Sorry I didn't get a hold of you." And he goes, "You really don't know what's going on." Very now openly just sounded bad, sounded terrible. I said, "What's going on, Doug?" And he goes, "Well, let me tell you what's going on. You need to first get to find a television because a plane has hit the World Trade Center." Now, at that point in time, having been flying like 100,000 miles a year, I'm trying to understand this because the World Trade Center, I've seen it a lot of times in my life. Even, looking out the window of an airplane, you can see it. It would be very easy to spot. And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He goes, "I don't know, but you better go get yourself to a television screen because, basically the shit has hit the fan." So I go, "Okay, Doug, I'll call you back, but, as far as I could tell, plans weren't going to change." So now I'm a little concerned, but I'm now going to look for a television screen. And what happens in an emergency situation like that in airports is they cut the video feed. So there is no CNN, rolling loop going on inside of the airport. I mean, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. There is no video feed whatsoever. So that's a disconcerting thing. So that means it's a big plane. That means it's a big event. What has taken place? So I called my brother, who's in Denver, living with my father at the time. And I said, "Hey, I just want you to know that I'm in Phoenix and what's going on?" And he goes, "Well, we're watching the television and two planes have hit the World Trade Center." And I'm like, "How could that happen?" Because obviously one plane could hit it, mistake, something took place, accident, but this is no accident. He says, "Yep. Looks like this thing there's something going on, some kind of attack." Now, I now am very concerned, and I'm walking towards the gate where my guy is coming in on, and I said to my brother, "I'll call you back." And this guy rides up on a mountain bike with a little shorts, but he's got a vest on, and it says police, and he says, "Sir, by order of the FAA, this airport is hereby closed." I went, "What?" He goes, "You must leave immediately. You must get out of the airport. It's closed." And he goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, guy who works for me is coming off the plane. I was going to meet with him." He goes, "Sir, this airport is closed, or here, by order of the FAA, it is hereby closed." Now he rides over to somebody else. So I'm going to I got to find my guy because I know this is going to be, really a hard thing. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around it. Virtually no information. And off the plane comes my guy. We'll call him Bob. And he comes off the plane and he's got his head down, marching away because he's like, he's really intense guy. And I said to him, "Bob, where's your cell phone?" He goes, "Well, it's in my bag," because Bob, remember, 2001, only guys like me carried the cell phone in their hand all the time, right? And it sure wasn't one of these. We had I had a flip phone. I said, "Well, you need to call your kids." And he stopped, and it snapped him out of his kind of like, marching mentality. And he goes, "What the hell has happened to my kids?" And I said, "Nothing, but they're going to want to know that you're okay." He goes, "Tell me what's going on." I said, "Just tell them that you're in Phoenix, you've landed safely, and, we're going to take it from there." So he follows that. And I said, "But we have to get to the rental car place ASAP." So we both are in marching mode, boom, 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 because, of course, he's talking to his kids. He's finding out, now by this certain time he's divorced, so, he's got to call him up. And they're relieved to find out. He's getting some kind of details from them, but, they're crying, they're upset. what's going on. And we get to there, and at this point in time in Phoenix, all the rental car agencies were still in the airport. You didn't have to get on the stupid bus and go to the, everything is right there. Now, because of my client having a Avis Wizard thing, I have this Wizard number, which is great because now you like bypass all the lines. And I walk over, and it is just crazy the number of people who are there trying to rent a car. So I'm standing there, and I get in the line, and I'm getting close to the front. Now, I notice, because this is a crisis, and here's a lesson for everybody: when there's a crisis, you do whatever you need to do at that exact moment. You can second guess your shit later, but you got to do it right now. And that means you got to rent whatever you're going to have. I don't care if they have a little tiny car, like a little clown car from a circus, or they got a bus. I mean, I'm renting a damn car. So while I'm standing there, the person next to me is offered this Cadillac, and they're, well, what kind of mileage is it? I mean, seriously. And I just basically shout out, "I'll take the Cadillac." And the guy leans over, grabs the keys, and takes it, goes, "Yes, sir. Here's your Wizard thing." And the guy looks at me and goes, "Well, I was thinking about it." I said, "You were thinking, not deciding." I've decided, and I got the Cadillac. So we go get the Cadillac, and we drive over to the hotel that my client is at. And we get there, and of course, the entire hotel, maybe not the entire, a lot of people from the hotel are gathered around the television sets and are watching. And this is the first time I'm actually seeing the video of the planes hitting the towers and the news feeds going on. And I have to tell you that I was taken back. I was very much like a big giant, hitting the solar plexus. I was taken back. Now, my client is there, and there's two people. There's the CEO, and then there was, somebody from the engineering team. And we're scheduled to go out and see the guys at Lockheed Martin and Litchfield Park. And I said, I don't know if that meeting is going to happen. Now, the CEO, who was a New Yorker living in Boston, like, a very, one of those kind of worst of all possibilities, says, "Bullshit. We're going to, I didn't fly all the way out here not to go to a meeting. We're going to go to a meeting. Hey, this has just happened." Now, I understand living in denial. I understand that. And I understand that he wants to honestly go figure out what's going on. So we pile into the Cadillac. He has checked out, got all of his luggage. We drive out to Litchfield Park, which is about 30, 40-minute drive from the airport, something like that. Traffic is a lot more moderate than it would normally be because, something's seriously going on. And we get out there, and lo and behold, they say, "Sure, we'll see you." And I think, well, maybe this is just a speed bump. Maybe we haven't smacked the giant concrete embankment and had the airbags deployed. And we go and meet with them. And first off, there isn't a full crew. And the senior staff, along with my client, my guy, and myself, are sitting now in their boardroom, which is kind of like a wood-paneled conference room, fancy. And the television is on. And for the next 40 to 60 minutes, we're sorting this out. All of us are sorting it out. What the hell's happened? And by this point in time, of course, all 4 planes had gone through the process. The Pentagon had been attacked. There was a plane that went missing. And the statement comes up that all airspace is shut down. Entire country is shut down. Now, for somebody who has been flying, like me, for that many years, it was, how do you grapple with that? How do you put your head around it? Now, after this charade of a meeting, and I understand, they're trying to be sympathetic. This guy flew out. Nothing's getting done. And I just say, look, we're not going to get anywhere today. It just is one of those days that changes everything. Like Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. changes everything. It's just like bang, changes everything. So I get we take my client, we're all go down to the Cadillac, and I say to the CEO, Don, I said, Don, here's what we're gonna do. Actually, here's what I'm gonna do. I don't know what you're gonna do, but here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take this car and I'm gonna drive it to LA because that's where I live. Bob is gonna go with me. Now, you're welcome to go with me. You could stay here because, of course, there are no planes, so you can't fly. We're not going to Dallas, clearly, because there's no flights right now. And this isn't like it's going to blow over in a couple of hours. This is some serious shit. And I said, so you can come with us. And he grumbled, wasn't quite sure, made a couple of calls to corporate, which, they're devastated because they're in Boston, You see where some of the planes came out of? And he goes, okay, I'm going to go with you to Southern California. So now we're on a spontaneous road trip during some very depressing times. And we're taking that long highway, Interstate 10, from Phoenix towards LA. Cell coverage was much spottier in those days. Radio reception was almost non-existent. And in the car, the four of us, we're all smart. We're trying to grapple with basically what the fuck just happened. What happened to all of this thing? What is going on? And the fact that, terrorists had turned Boeing 757, 767s into missiles and destroyed 2 buildings that we know of. How many more were there? Didn't know. So we're driving to Southern California, and I say, well, here's the thought. Stay out by my house because I live east of LA, about halfway between LA and Palm Springs. Stay out by my house, and the next day we'll go to LAX and let's see what you can do from LAX. But I'm telling you that this looks like it's going to be some bad stuff. I had no way of knowing it, but I had a sense of the magnitude of what we had just experienced. He goes, okay, that sounds all right. So I call my office, have them make arrangements for them to have hotel rooms, along with Bob, and we drive to Southern California. The next day, pack everybody up in the car, and of course, now the debriefings have happened. Now the president has made it back to the White House. We understand that the Vice President, Dick Cheney, was in the Pentagon when it was attacked. We now know how that brick or that stone building withstood the impact of a jetliner, insanely strong building. And we're going to drive to LAX. Now, there is no indication that LAX is open, nor that we can do anything at all there. But my client, Don, and his person, I can't remember the guy's name, we could call him whatever we want, but Don is convinced that LA is going to open up and he's going to fly home to Boston. And I said, Boston ain't opening for a while. Now, of course, he's a little irritated that we're not going on to Dallas. And I said, I called the guys in Dallas this morning, and no one is going into work today. No one expects us to even be there. Nobody even thinks that we'd even think about being there. What are you guys, nuts? So we drive to LAX. And again, traffic is significantly lighter. If you live in LA area like I have for so many years, you live your life based upon how the traffic gods are treating you that day. And as we're driving on the Century Freeway, the 105, what we find out is that as we're getting closer to LAX, there's all these flashing temporary signs saying that LAX is closed and that the highway is closed. And we get to the near to the final exit, but it's still a couple exits away. And there are armored vehicles, no hyperbole, armored vehicles. There are military standing on the freeway directing us to exit. From that elevated highway, we can see all of LAX. And the entirety of LAX is filled with airplanes, and nothing obviously is moving at all. It was a chilling sense of the enormity of what had happened and where we were at and what was going on, and that no, he was not going to fly. I said, what do you want to do? He said, well, let's go get a hotel right by the airport. So when this thing opens back up, I'm just going to jump on a shuttle, get on the plane. I'm cool with that because, what else are we going to do? I mean, there's other logistics stuff I've got to deal with my own people, let alone dealing with babysitting this guy, okay, who's convinced that this thing is going to blow over, open up, and he's going to be flying home any second. I guess you could call it an optimism. You could call it an arrogance. You could call it whatever you want to call it. So we find him a hotel. By the way, it was not a great hotel. It was a little farther from LAX because the hotels are filling up. And I said to Bob, Bob, what do you want to do? Because you're in Austin. And Bob says, well, what are we going to do with the rental car? And I said, well, you're going to drive it wherever you want to drive it, because I'm going to tell you right now, Avis is going to be very understanding in the midst of this crisis. So he said, okay. I said, so why don't you, because you have to go past my house anyway, drive me back, drop me off, and then if you want to drive the car back to Austin, you got my blessing, drive it back to Austin. I have to tell you, Austin, Texas ain't that close to LA. But he decides that's what he's going to do. That's his drive. That's his motivation, and I don't blame him. So Bob departs. I said, Bob, we'll figure this out, sort it out. If you get to the Avis counter at Austin Airport, give me a shout, tell me what's going on, because, of course, his car is sitting in the Austin Airport. And away he goes. Now, back at the ranch, I'm now faced with the fact that I have with me, and he is actually in Boston. He's in Boston, and he had been at the client because, again, we're doing this turnaround, and he is at the Lowell Hilton. What an interesting place that was, but he was at the Lowell Hilton, beautiful downtown Lowell, Massachusetts. And he says, hey, John, we got to figure something out. Now, he, at the time, lived in Vancouver, British Columbia. And he said, what do you think we should do? Because this is a shitstorm, to say the least. And I said, well, what do you have? And he goes, well, I ended up getting a van. And I said, well, here's what you ought to do. Because we had to think this thing through. Because logistics, I've learned a lot about travel and logistics in my life. By the way, if you want a great life lesson, amateurs talk about strategy, professionals talk about logistics. Logistics is how to get the strategy done so you can actually implement it. So I said, okay, why don't you do this? Drive the van to Buffalo, New York from Boston. So I know this is like a travel log for everybody. And turn in the van, dump the van, take the bus to the Canadian border, walk across the border, because literally the border was shut down, catch whatever you have to catch on the other side, get to Toronto Airport, fly home, because Canadian airspace was, Canada never shut down. Why would they? They weren't attacked. He said, good plan, John, good plan. He liked it. Now, again, he helped me develop it, but good plan. We had a good plan. So he goes down, and at the lobby, there's this young couple who are there, and they're from San Diego, and they're on their honeymoon. I don't know why you're in Lowell, Massachusetts for your honeymoon. I guess love does crazy things. And he says, look, here's what I'm doing. I'm driving from here, basically Boston to Buffalo, going across, catching a flight, getting to the West Coast, and Toronto to Vancouver is wide open. And at least since you live in San Diego, you'll be on the West Coast. So when this thing opens up, because, from Vancouver to Seattle is a couple-hour drive, but you can, as soon as things open up, you can get there. There's buses every day. Also from Seattle to LA to San Diego, there's a train. I've actually taken the train from LA to Seattle. Long ride, but there's a train. And they're like, well, no, we're going to be okay. Now he hands them his business card. And he says, well, good luck to the two of you. I don't think you're making a great decision, but okay. He takes off, drives across Massachusetts and New York, drops it off, again, goes across the border, very surrealistic because you have to carry all your own luggage and stuff, gets on the shuttle and gets to Toronto Airport. And it's like way over the top. Meantime, and he flies home to Vancouver, done. Meantime, my client is stuck out by LAX because nothing's happening, getting more irritated by the moment. Now, one of the people that I work closely with in my client is Ed, and Ed is actually in London, and he's trying to get back to Boston, and he's stuck. So I say to my client, though this has nothing to do with what I do, again, I know a lot about travel logistics. I say, you know what? Buy Ed a ticket to fly from London to Toronto because there's a lot of direct flights, and my guess is, bang, he's back, and at least he's on this continent, and he can reverse what my guy did to get to Vancouver. They basically tell me, bullshit, don't need to do that. Well, Ed gets stuck there. The American Express card, that the corporate one, runs out because they had stiff limits. They're wiring him money. Shit show. That's the only way to say it. Now, that was how 9/11 happened for me. But there's always a backstory and then an after story. So here's the backstory. At that point in time, my father and my two uncles were both still alive, very much alive, in decent health. And I had wanted to, for a period of time, because I had then gotten into publishing and had been doing, at least audio and doing some video, not much. And I had decided with my brother and my cousin that what we really wanted to do before these three guys got older or infirmed or passed away is go to New York City. Because even though my father was born on the Polish-Ukrainian border, he grew up on the Lower East Side in New York and had all of these tales. And in fact, they had been through a horrific time during the Great Depression. And what my vision of this was, today it would have been easier, was to hire a videographer, take those three, take the three of us plus, wives, sweethearts, and significant others, and all go to New York City and go to every single place that they had lived in the 1930s and been evicted. By the way, they were evicted 17 times during the Great Depression. So when one wonders, my father didn't really share it with me till later in his life. Now I understood why he was so concerned about real estate speculation and things like that. Sorry, Dad. So that was the backstory. We were supposed to be there. The last address that we have from my grandmother is 2.4 miles away from the World Trade Center, according to Google. You can walk it in about 55 minutes if you don't walk that fast. That's where they grew up. That's where we were supposed to be. In fact, we were supposed to be there on 9/11. We were supposed to organize all that. But organizing that cast of cats, that group of cats, proved to be impossible. My publishing business was going well. So I had to be in Chicago. I thought, well, if I'm already in Chicago, flying from Chicago to New York, easy. My turnaround was doing pretty well. But what happened is I couldn't organize the three brothers, and I couldn't get them to agree to getting there. But that was my date, 9/11, 2001. That was the day that I wanted to be there, going through and living the experience of where they grew up and how they grew up and what happened. But for whatever reason, it never came together on that day. Sad postscript is that it never came together ever. Now, I have some video of them talking about it, but it's not like going there, and maybe someday I'll actually go to those places and look it up. But it's different than being there with the person who said, I remember that we used to play stickball right there, or that we used to walk past here, or we used to go spend time here, or this is where, because my father had, done things on the parallel bars and the horizontal bar and was kind of a gymnast, but school didn't really have a team, but he learned how to do that. And in fact, was very good at it even through his later years. But we never did that. But in some ways, I guess we were spared because we would have been right in the middle of that. The other thing that changed forever for me is that I did go to Dallas the very next week. And what changed was, in fact, instead of planes being packed, that flight from Ontario to Dallas on that American Airlines flight that I took, there were a handful of people. They didn't have the security mechanisms figured out. So they searched everybody's luggage by hand, almost like going to a foreign country and looking for contraband. They had no idea what to do. And as we sat on that plane and took that direct flight, the pilot, the co-pilot, the purser, all the flight attendants individually walked around and thanked us for flying. The pilot said to me, "Thank you for having the courage to fly." The flight attendant, the one, was so emotional, tears in her eyes. Even today, makes me well up to see her very sad face because, well, she had 20 years experience, and what had happened would, in fact, inevitably change her life in a dramatic way because didn't know what was going to take place. Now, what happened after that is that when I flew back from Atlanta, the end of that week, is that, well, there were 16 people on a flight. It was empty. And I started to wonder, will we get back to another newer, better, whatever? Also, we then understood more, but in some ways, we'll never really understand it. This is for history to end up writing it. This is for history to learn it and then understand it in a different way. But personally, it changed everything. Previously, I could drive up to Ontario Airport, park the car. As long as I was 22 minutes before flight time, I could make that flight to Phoenix, run through security. Never again. And what it meant is that my world had changed forever, and it was never going to be the same again. And it has not. In fact, it has gotten even crazier as time went on. Oh, and the publishing business, having done promotion after promotion after promotion with my distributor, every single one being profitable. Wow. And because of 9/11, I get a hold of Dan Kennedy, who had helped me write the sales copy, the sales letter. And Dan said, under no circumstance should you send out the letter that we have, which has worked so well because that was, in fact, our standard letter. That was our control. You should never send that letter out under these circumstances. We should rewrite the letter. We should talk about the 9/11 situation and why it's more important than ever that you mark it differently. And we should do that. This is this circumstance. It's a terrible situation, but you cannot ignore this massive event. And I authorized Dan to start rewriting it. And, it's going to cost me thousands of dollars. And I called my distributor and I said, we got to change the letter. We can't send it out. And he says, too late, John. We've already gone to press. We've already printed them. We'll just send them the way they are. It is going to be okay. I said, bullshit, it won't be. He and I got into the longest heated discussion he and I ever had. And like those towers, my business collapsed because they did that mailing, and that was a giant money loser. It sucked. Plus, I had paid Dan, got the new copy, showed it to them. Well, what did the distributor do? They fired the editor. That's what they called him. Basically, he was a coordinator of these kinds of promotions. Fired him because, of course, nothing was working. No kidding. No shit. And then they got a new editor. New editor showed up. Now, we priced the kit at $1,000. It had enough margin that they made money. I made money. I could do the fulfillment. Customers would actually get something out of it. The new editor came in and said, I've got a different approach. Great. I said, I have a letter. We can send it out. John, it's a little negative, isn't it? It's a little, maybe people don't want to be reminded about 9/11. Reminded, they can't get it out of their head. If Robert Collier was at all correct that you want to enter the mind with the and you want to enter the conversation that's already happening inside their mind, it was that. Never sent the letter. His brilliant idea was to cut the price by 90% so we could expand the market, which would mean I would lose money on every single one of them, as would he. And that was the end of that distribution deal. And effectively, that was the end of that publishing business. So when I talk about how 9/11 changed my life in a lot of ways. Now, doesn't mean that I didn't learn and survive and do what everybody has to do at this point in time. But I share with you that 19 years ago today, precisely today, in fact, as I look at the clock, 19 years ago today, I was in a mad scramble. I was trying to understand what had happened, not knowing what the future would bring. And what it did is it changed my life forever. Now, it isn't as tragic as those nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives that day. But I can tell you, when your life changes forever, the most important thing that you can always remember is that when those days take place, do not hold on to some fantasy that there is some snap back to the way it used to be. How apropos for the time that we have. I absolutely believe that we need to be united and stand against those forces of evil that want to do us harm, and that we should never, ever forget that fateful day 19 years ago called 9/11, 2001. This is John Paul Mendocha, Dr. Speed Selling, and this is the Raging Verbalist, number 42. And I hope that you'll take a moment and in your prayers, think about those who sacrificed so much so you can have what you have in your life.